What's up, guys? This is episode 3 of the Endless Endeavor podcast with Greg Anderson. And my guest today is a guy that spent 4 years in the Ranger Regiment with me. We grew up as privates and became Tab Spec 4s and sergeants together and deployed together numerous times. And we thought it'd be a cool idea to kind of share our experience with the Ranger Regiment, why we went into it, what we got out of it, and some of the things that we learned through that experience. This is actually, it's kind of funny. It's take 2. We did this episode last week, and listening to it after the fact, we realized we dropped way too many F-bombs. And before we knew it, we were just being privates in the barracks, talking shit to each other. And so maybe at a later date, we'd release some of that stuff. Military personnel may think that that's kind of funny. But we also kind of went off on tangents. And I think it's important, being new to podcasting and trying to understand how to put out quality content, we wanted to kind of stick to a theme for an episode. And I think our experience in the Ranger Regiment alone could be multiple episodes. So what we wanted to do today is stick to that theme, teach you guys what we learned throughout our time in the Ranger Regiment. And for young men that are aspiring to follow in that path in the future, they can listen to this and have a better understanding of what that path looks like. So I'm going to allow Toby to introduce himself, and then we're going to kind of just walk you guys through that path that we took to become Army Rangers.
All right. Hello, anyone and everyone listening. My name is Tobin Foulke. Friends call me Toby. I am now a commercial electrician. I served with Greg, as he mentioned, in the 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, from a small town called Omak, Washington. Graduated high school there in 1998. Grew up playing sports, kind of very all-American / Americana, almost like a John Mellencamp song. But from there, I went to college for a year, not because I wanted to go to college, but because, you know, even back in 97, 98, the narrative was, you have to go to college, you have to go to college. What am I going to do? Don't know, just go to college. So I went for a year, did not like it. I guess when I was I must have been 6th or 7th grade, my dad gave me a book called, it was called Eyes of the Eagle, written by Gary Linder. And he was a member of one of the Ranger companies in Vietnam. And so that book, like, grabbed my imagination. You know, what are you in 6th grade, like 14, 13?
No, 12.
12?
Yeah.
And so from that point on, I read every book about LRPs, the Long Range Reconnaissance Patrols companies, which later became designated Ranger companies. You know, I must have read 50, I don't know how many paperbacks are written by those guys, but there's a bunch of them out there. There's another series called Six Silent Men. I think it's a 3-book series. I read all those, you know what I mean? So this idea of Army Ranger was always in my head. And it was something that, you know, you read these exploits and the guys talk about the things they did and they went through, and I was like, man, to be on that level would just be amazing. And so I was in college, not enjoying it. Even at the university, the counselors are asking, what are you going to major in? I said, I don't know. I'm good at math. They're like, well, be an engineer. What does an engineer do? We don't know, but you should do that.
Yeah, it's like asking an 18-year-old kid to decide a path start a trajectory that he's going to follow for the next 40, 50 years.
That's ridiculous.
It's pretty unreasonable.
It is unreasonable.
And it's interesting because a lot of guys in the special operations community, like you just mentioned, had this calling or this desire since a very young age. And then, like I spoke about in episode 1, it was the opposite of that. I had no idea what a Ranger was. I never had aspirations to be in the military. And very similar to you, I knew I didn't want to do college. So I didn't have that experience where I actually went to college and needed to actually experience it to know that I didn't want to be there. I hated high school enough to know that I didn't want to continue education. And just talking to recruiters and talking to a couple other guys that were in our school that were going into the military, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give that a try. And the only reason that I wanted to become a Ranger is because I thought, if I'm going to give 4 years of my life to this, let's see how far I can take it. And to this day, I tell people, if you want to do as much as you can do in one enlistment, it's going to be the Ranger Regiment. And I'm obviously biased because that's the route we took. But even back then, I was thinking, I think the only two special operations units you can get into on an enlistment is a SEAL team or a Ranger battalion.
Yeah, and I listened to your first episode, and I heard you say that, and I kind of shook my head or nodded my head, agreed with you. But then it dawned on me, you and I thrived in the Ranger Battalion. Not everybody thrived there. For some people, that was a very miserable experience.
Mm-hmm.
And when young guys ask me, should I join the Army? I say, I don't know. What do you want out of it? Sometimes it's, well, I want GI Bill, or if you just need to burn 4 years and be productive, it's not a bad place to go. But I think a lot, like the one thing that has always stuck with me, I think for a lot of people, the Army is either the best experience of their lives or the worst. And I don't know that there's a lot of middle ground. Maybe I'm wrong because, again, we had a very narrow experience, living behind the fence on the Ranger compound.
Yeah.
But the other thing is when kids say, so-and-so knows your mom. She said you were an Army Ranger. I'm thinking of going in. Should I be a Ranger? I say no. Because if they have what it takes, I'm not going to slow them down.
Yeah.
And
no, that's a good point. If one conversation with one person changes their trajectory, it might not be for you.
Exactly. And we didn't know. I didn't, still going in, even though I'd read these books, I didn't really know, what was going to happen, what was going to come of it. And, going back to growing up, I'll rewind the clock here just for a second. Because I grew up in such a small town, we were just kind of out in the woods all the time. And so I was real comfortable just kind of being out in the woods. And like, I can remember guys quitting because they had to crap in a hole, and they were from Brooklyn and they weren't going to crap in a hole.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, well,
it's just such a foreign concept to someone that's grown up
exactly
in a city life their whole life.
Yeah. And there were plenty of guys from the big cities who made it, no problem. But, I just sort of adapted well to the Ranger Battalion. You adapted well to some guys just get there and it's like, oh yeah, we were meant, even though we didn't know what we were getting into, we were made for this.
And I think, and I did touch on this on episode 1 as well. I think the two things that make good Rangers is the inability to want to quit, and then also understanding how to work well in a team dynamic.
Yes.
If you can't embrace that camaraderie and learn to live with those guys, and you go through everything with, what's a platoon? Typically 30 men, but men that are actually your rank, that's your peer group, there's probably half that.
Yeah.
And that's your family for the next 4 years. And if you can't embrace that and like be part of that experience is going to be exponentially more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, last time we sat down and hashed some of this stuff out, we talked about how I felt guys like you that played team sports your whole life almost had a leg up on me, not only because of the physicality and just the athleticism that comes up growing up being an athlete, but also that ability to work well with others, team dynamics, follow orders, and all of those things that really it almost carries over to exactly what a Ranger platoon does.
Yeah. And, growing up playing football and loving football and just eat football, sleep football, breathe football. It's all I thought about through high school and that year of college. And the thing about it, I think that, looking back on it, that you don't know when you're 17 years old, is that the team was tight. Like, we ate lunches. We went to the coach's room to watch film during lunch. We didn't sit with the other guy. The team was sitting in coach's room watching game film. And in the summer we had, it was like Monday, Wednesday, Friday evening was weightlifting, and everybody, the coaches couldn't require you to be there, but there was a lot of peer pressure that if you wanted to be part of that sort of inner circle of the team, then you need to be at summer weight training. And in a lot of ways, the football team was a little bit like the Ranger Regiment in that football practice sucks. It's really hard. You don't play a lot of football at football practice. You get sweaty, you get beat up, you get knocked around, you do a lot of drills where you're at that level where you're about to throw up for almost 2 hours. And so if you don't really love being there, it's not a good experience. And so I think a lot of kids, again, at least with the football team, you can walk away. And a lot of kids do. But the Ranger Regiment was a very similar, that really tight-knit group of, there's a lot of peer pressure to keep up. And, the other thing I thought of, I'm starting to jump around here a little bit, but one of the good things the Ranger Regiment has done that most other special operations units have not is they have not created their own MOS. A Navy SEAL has its own MOS. Green Berets have their own MOS. So once those guys are designated that rate, it's really hard to get rid of them.
Oh, obviously I know that, but I never
the Ranger
really
Regiment
took a step back and thought about that. That's
the
a
Ranger
good point.
Regiment and Delta Force do not have an MOS. So every day you have to strive to be excellent. And the day you stop striving to be excellent, see ya.
Yeah.
You're gone.
No, I always tell people that's one of the biggest benefits of being in the regiment is that if any time you fall below the standard, and it's not like, hey, you woke up sick and you fell out of a run, you're out of here. They obviously have a reasonable approach to it. But if you drop below the standard or you fail a qual or you fail a PT test, all right, hey, in 2 weeks, we're going to retest you. And if you're still below that, RFS.
Yeah.
Release, and that means release for standards. So I think it's an interesting way to live is that you're always on the chopping block. And if you're always on the chopping block, you are either going to continue to perform or you're going to be sent down the road. And that keeps guys at a higher level. And that's something, I mean, we could do a whole nother podcast on this. My current profession of law enforcement, it's very similar to where, all right, these are the PT standards to get into the profession. This is the shooting standard to get into the profession. And once you're in, you're literally never tested again. Yeah. And so what motivates guys to stay at a certain level and meet these expectations if there's no consequences? Yeah. And that's what was, you could be a sergeant or an E6 in Ranger Regiment, and if you fall below the standards, you're probably going to be going down the road.
Yeah. So anyway, to bring it all back around and tie it all in together, that year of college, I wasn't happy. I played on, it was a Division III college. I was a redshirt cornerback. The team was not, actually I would say the team was tight, but I was an outsider. So I didn't have that, that camaraderie that I was missing.
What do you mean you were an outsider?
Meaning I was a redshirt, I was a walk-on, and the team had come together 2 weeks before school started, and then walk-ons came and tried out the first week.
Okay.
So I showed up, walked on, made as a freshman redshirt. You're basically a practice squad player, which is fine. I was playing football, I was happy, but I was not really accepted into the inner circle, and so I was kind of like, I'm not real happy, and I knew I wasn't coming back to school when I left in the spring, and that was when I started talking to the recruiters. And I had to go back to MEPS a couple times. I had to cheat through the color vision test and to get so you had to wait and hope that they took volunteers for RIP. I was able to get a RIP contract. So I knew when I signed that I was at least going to go try out for the Ranger Regiment. And reading those books in middle school and high school and having that experience on the high school football team, it all sort of came together, and it was like all roads converged at the 75th Ranger Regiment.
That's cool. And what a RIP contract is, when we went through, it was called RIP, which is the Ranger Indoctrination Program. And we'll go into that in depth. But you can either get that in your enlistment contract, so you know that you're going to get a shot at going to the Ranger selection, or you can volunteer to go there once you're done with AIT and Airborne school, which is what I did. But that's rolling the dice, because the Ranger Regiment is only going to accept people into their RIP program with needs of the regiment in mind. So it's not always available. And so I know these days it's called Option 40. Was it? I don't think it was called that back then. I think that
was.
It was?
Man, it's been 20 years.
Okay. I didn't have it, so I don't remember. I don't know what it was called back then. But yeah, for any young guys listening that want a shot at the Ranger Regiment, you want that Option 40 in your contract, because what that does, it guarantees you, once you go through basic training, you go through AIT, then you're sent through Airborne school, and after that, you get to go to the Ranger selection and assessment phase. And from there, the Army gave you all the opportunities to get there. After that, it's on you. Then that's the whole point. And if you make it, great. And if you don't, it's back to needs of the Army. So we'll get into that a little more. I just wanted to let people know what RIP stands for, because I know Army guys start dropping acronyms left and right. It's easy to get lost. So then when you enlisted at MEPS, were you in the delayed entry program at all, or did you ship out right away?
I think I must have been for a couple weeks, because I remember going home and my parents knew I wasn't going back to college. And they did not, oh Lord, stumbling over my words here. So remember I said that, I came from a family that pushed college. So I was like, boy, they might not be happy about this, but they knew I wasn't going back to college. So I think really I'd been working on a farm all summer and smoking a bunch of weed and just basically going nowhere. So I think they were happy that I had signed the contract. And I remember coming home and being home for a few weeks after I signed. And then you get on that flight from Portland to Atlanta. And I remember being like, oh God, what did I do? You know what I mean? And you think about it, like, not so much basic and airborne, but going into RIP, like, all I had was imagination. I'd read these books of these guys. So I considered these guys are gods in my mind, these Vietnam era Ranger Company guys. I'm like, am I me? Little old Toby? You kidding? Like, what am I thinking?
Yeah, it gets real quick. Yeah, I remember as soon as you land in the Atlanta airport, there's drill sergeants walking the terminal.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, private, get over here. And I remember thinking, like, how do they even know I'm in the Army, But those guys, that's what they do for a living. They can tell from a mile away.
You don't even have your head shaved at that
Nope,
point.
exactly.
Yeah.
But they know exactly who you are. And, they round you up and put you on a bus, and to Fort Benning you go. And once you get to Fort Benning, let's see, again, it's 20 years ago, if I can remember all this.
You have a full week at that
30th AG.
30th AG.
Reception Battalion.
Yes.
And you get there, and at that time, everybody at Fort Benning, I believe, was either infantry or at least combat MOS, right?
I think Fort Benning is only infantry. So again, for
it's
folks...
changed since then.
Oh, okay. Never mind. In 1999... infantrymen went through a different basic training that combined all other MOSs went to a 9-week basic and then went to their MOS school to learn their job. Infantrymen just had the whole thing combined into a basic, what do they call it? OSET?
OSET.
One-stop unit training.
One station unit training.
And so you went through basic and infantry training sort of congruently.
Yeah, with the same platoon, with the same drill sergeant. The day you graduate basic training, you go downstairs to formation. They're like, congratulations, you made it. All right. And then the day begins just like any other day. It didn't change at all. I remember when I went through that, Fort Benning was only infantry guys. So obviously a combat MOS. And back in 1999, no females could join any of the combat MOSs.
That's right.
So once you get to 30th AG, it's just hundreds of 18-year-old dudes
packed into a giant squad or platoon company bay. There must have been 150 of us in the one bay.
And everybody was talking about how badass they were going to be.
Yes.
I remember sitting there thinking, like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
Because like Toby just said, it's a week-long process. But in that week, I mean, new guys are arriving every day. And then once you get your 7 days of, you got to get your shots, you have to get your haircut, you have to have your equipment issued. So once you get all that done, then you ship out to your basic training battalion. So the dudes that had been there for 3 or 4 days, they were like,
salty dogs.
They were OGs. Remember that?
They were about to go downrange.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey man, when you get downrange, this is like, wait a minute. How do you know this?
The cattle truck's going to come and pick you up.
Shark attack.
It's hilarious, dude. But so that's what happens. You spend about a week there getting ready for basic training, and then a cattle truck shows up, and I don't even remember, what is it? Each basic training battalion, each company is 4 platoons, right?
Yes.
So you're probably looking at give or take 100 guys.
I think we had 30. Yes, I'd guess, 100 to 120, I guess, depending on the class size.
And I think they fit all 120 on one cattle truck.
So we had a school bus. Yeah. So what I remember is the drill sergeants at 30th AG were tough, but they weren't like over the top. And I can remember that bus pulling up outside. I can still remember it's Bravo Company 258. And I think I can almost remember the damn song.
That was Hell's Kitchen.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And thinking, looking out the window and like, these are our real drill sergeants. And the moment the door opened, those guys were screaming and hollering and I mean, this is back in '99 when they couldn't hit you, but they could still kind of put their hands on you. They could grab your bags and throw, you know what I mean? People's stuff was getting tossed left and right. They're screaming. You don't know, like, and there's not a lot of discipline in that week at 30th AG. You're just kind of existing in limbo, being issued uniforms and boots and just getting shots and filling out paperwork and whatnot. Basic training starts when you get off that bus. And so it's a little bit of culture shock. And I remember going up in the platoon bay, and they got us all standing by our racks at attention. And I thought, man, it's hot in here. So I looked behind me, there's a window. I turned around, opened the window. And,
you didn't watch Full Metal Jacket enough times.
God. They lost their minds.
Of course they did.
Up to that point, I can remember being at 30th AG and someone getting in trouble and us doing like 25 push-ups and being like, boy, that was 25.
They smoked me.
Right.
That was my first time getting smoked.
I used to lift a lot of weights, you know what I mean? It's like, ooh, that was kind of rough. Dude, we were in the front leaning rest for probably an hour and a half. I mean, puddles of sweat on the floor, our hands are slipping out. And that was like, that's the first 15 minutes that we're there. So that was our welcome introduction to infantry training.
Now, the drill sergeant position is something that always intrigued me. And I almost went down that route at one point in time in my career. But to this day, the drill sergeants that were solid guys that were there to better you and really impart their knowledge on you and make you a better soldier. To this day, I remember a lot of those lessons. And I'm sure it's like anything in the Army. Some guys are shitheads and then some are, star players. But the drill sergeants that we had were really good dudes. Like I felt like, I don't know if that's how, like if they have a really strict standard in hiring those guys, but I felt like we had really good drill sergeants.
I had 2 of 3 that were outstanding, and I had one that was, I think he was actually a drug addict, because he would, when it was his night to be on duty, he would go in his office and come out doing like the cokehead thing, like kind of, and just like all jacked up and amped up. And he, looking back on it, he was not a squared away soldier, but the other 2 really were.
Well, and it's like we always say, what do they say? The 10% rule.
And if you're getting 66%, you're doing pretty good.
And it doesn't matter if you're a drill sergeant or a ranger or a Navy SEAL. Every single unit has top performers and it has shitheads. There's no way around that. And so I remember basic training was supposed to be 8 weeks. I ended up having 4 0 weeks. Yeah, exactly. And I'll explain what a 0 week is. A 0 week is a week of your life that doesn't count for your training. Yeah. And I got there on August 3rd of 99. And then we went to our, like I said, the first week is in processing. And then we went to our training battalion. So it was probably August 10th or something around there. And they're like, hey, just so you know, they shipped you guys down here a month early, and we can't officially start until I think it was like September 10th. And we're all like, what the hell is this? Yep. And they're like, so we'll start chipping away at training and maybe get you guys ready for when it officially begins. But, you guys got down here a month early. The whole company did. And I remember thinking like, this is my introduction to the Army. I'm like, did these guys fuck up that bad? Or are they just like, you know what, get those privates down there ASAP so they don't have a change of heart and not show up? I have no idea.
It's probably a combination of both. I did not experience a 0 week until Ranger school, which to this day I'm still like, they call it a 60-day school. God damn it, it's 67.
And every hour counts in that school.
And 0 week is not easy. 0 week, you're getting sprayed with a fire hose standing out in the Malvesti, and that was in January. I'm sure it's a lot more enjoyable in the summer. Kidding.
That's funny, man. So then you go through, like you said, you go through basic training, then you go through advanced infantry training. And after you graduate that's when you go to Airborne school. And anybody that wants to go into the Ranger Regiment or has a option 40 contract, that's the next phase of the pipeline. You're not going into the Ranger Battalion until you're Airborne qualified, meaning you learn how to jump out of airplanes or fall out of airplanes, whatever you want to call it. And it's funny because a lot of people think, I remember when I went to Airborne school, it was like a vacation. It was like we had nights and weekends off. The PT was easy. But for other people that weren't coming out of basic training, that were coming from other military units, like
So there were a lot of like E6s who had got it as a reward for re-enlisting, and they were coming from regular life.
and it was smoking the shit out of them.
Yeah, yeah, they were not used to getting yelled at, and to a bunch of infantry recruits who've their life is getting screamed at. This was like party.
Yeah, I know. Like, oh, we're off duty at 1700.
Right.
There's nothing you can do to me that's going to bum me
Exactly.
out.
Yeah.
Because Victory Drive is waiting for us.
Yeah. I just remember like being so excited that I could walk over to the that little PX there, and I bought a Discman, and I bought all the Metallica CDs because you don't have any of your personal stuff with you, and I would just go lay in the barracks at night and listen to Metallica albums. Yeah, yeah. I bought them all. Because I had them all at home.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, I want to listen to Metallica.
Yeah, it's so weird how once you're deprived of something, and I don't know how it is in basic training anymore. I hear they get to have cell phones, and who knows what it's like. But when we went through, back when it was hard, everything is stripped from you. All your civilian clothes. There's obviously no phone. There was no internet. You don't get to email or talk to your girlfriend. None of that stuff. I think we got 5 minutes a week to call home, and there was a payphone and a line of 30 privates, and you got your 5 minutes to call mom and tell her you're still alive. And if you were 1 second over, people were like, hey, it's my turn,
Yeah.
And that was it. So you got 5 minutes a week to try and catch up, and you can decide, do you call mom? Do you call your girlfriend? And I think that's an important aspect of basic training. And I'm just talking shit. I don't know what it's like now. I mean, that's a rumor mill that it's gotten easier and you can have your phones and the stress cards. But detaching from all of the nonsense back home as an 18-year-old with the drama of your girlfriends and your friends and all this stuff, detaching from that is a key component to transformation from a snot-nosed kid to a soldier.
Absolutely.
And so once we went through that and we got our airborne wings, I think, what do we have to do? 5 jumps?
Yes.
Yeah, you're a five jump chump.
Yep.
And you're landing on a DZ, a drop zone that has like 18 inches of plowed sand. It was like, it was,
Yeah.
we didn't know how bad jumping was going to get
Right.
at that point. But as a private and airborne school, like, this is all good. It was fun.
Yeah.
And then when, I know I talked about it in my last episode, when the Ranger cadre came down to my class, I didn't have a contract, and they said, hey, who wants to be a Ranger? And we fell out, and then they took us on that death run. And I had an NCO leading it, and it sounds like, talking to you said they just drove back to the regiment, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So we didn't, like I said, we did not have the volunteer thing where you guys got in formation and they called for volunteers. Everybody that went through my class had come in with a RIP contract. So I don't remember if it was the Friday evening. I think it was the Friday afternoon. You finish airborne school, you do the graduation ceremony, and everybody's all happy, except for all the Ranger recruits know that in about an hour and a half, they're getting picked up and taken to RIP. And at this point, all you know is stories like, oh, RIP destroys you. RIP, you're not going to sleep for 3 weeks. They're going to beat your ass. All from guys who, I don't know how, I guess actually I had 2 drill sergeants, not my platoon, but in the company. One was a Mogadishu veteran and one was a Panama veteran, both 3rd Battalion.
Okay.
So they would, and they were actually, it's funny, they were not the screamers of all the drill sergeants. Like, go figure, the 2 guys who had been there, done that, didn't do a lot of screaming. But they knew who the RIP contract guys were, and they would kind of pull us aside once in a while, especially once they figured out, like, we're kind of squared away. And they'd, oh, this is what it's going to be like. This is what they're going to do. And they'd kind of give us a heads up. So we knew what was coming a little bit, just enough to be afraid, I guess, basically.
Yeah, I remember when I went through, I ended up being a holdover at RIP for another 3 weeks.
Oh, so you got to see it.
Yeah, I got to see it from the holdover barracks. And the guys that would quit would go into the holdover barracks, and then they would go needs of the Army. And I think they were sending most of them to Vincenza and 82nd.
Yep.
And so you're getting a play-by-play by the guys that quit.
Yeah.
And
Go figure.
For anybody that's ever been in the military, nobody ever fails a military selection or military school because they quit. They have an excuse list that is typically a mile long.
Oh, my knee hurt. The drill sergeant didn't like me.
Yeah.
And, I've just got this thing with my shoulder that's taken some time to heal.
And the 5 mile run was supposed to be at an 8-minute pace, and they ran it at a 7:15, and it just on and on and on, right?
Yes.
So then I got fed all this stuff, and I knew some of the guys that quit too, because my first RIP class started with the guys that I'd went through basic and airborne with, and then I was a medical recycle because my physical expired. And then talking to those guys, they're like, "You have no idea what it's like. It's the hardest thing you can imagine. Like, I never thought I'd quit, but I just couldn't take it anymore." And it's weird that you start to wonder, like, what are they going to do to me?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
am I going to quit?
Exactly.
Because I don't feel like I have any quit in me, but I wonder what,
Yeah.
I
All
wonder
you
what
have
that's
is your
going to,
imagination.
yeah, I wonder what they're
Yeah.
going to do. Like, if they're making these guys quit, can they make me quit?
Yeah.
But once I went through it, and again, this isn't to like sound like a tough guy or beat my chest, there was no point in RIP where I even considered quitting.
No.
Not 1 second.
Nope.
Like, and I, to this day, the 6 mile ruck run in RIP, which they still do, I just recently heard, that might be like
Good.
one of the hardest physical tasks I've
Yes.
ever done.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what it is. It's what, a 40-pound ruck. It's not
It's either-
super heavy.
Is it 45 or 60? It's probably 45. if you're
45, I
running.
think. Yeah, I don't think that it was 60.
But also remember we were wearing the Vietnam era LCEs with the meat hooks
Yep.
and
the
probably
canteens.
and carrying a rubber duck.
Yep.
Which, if you guys, when we say rubber duck, we're talking about a metal dummy M16 that's coated with like hockey puck type rubber. So it has the weight and look of the real thing, but it's a training rifle that you drag around with you, and you it's a boat anchor that you drag all through RIP, and you tie. In fact, it's tied to you.
You grow.
It is
to
tied
hate,
to you
you
with
grow to
550
hate that
cord.
thing. Yeah, and I remember, and I don't remember if this was RIP or pre-Ranger. Did we do land nav and RIP? I can't
Oh
remember.
yes,
There's a lot. Okay.
So just to back up, we didn't get the everybody volunteer. We had everybody standing out in a formation an hour and a half after graduation, and a truck pulled up, and you're staring straight ahead like a good private, but trying to look out the side of your eyes, and you can see a guy with a black beret on, and that's the first time you've seen a real Ranger. And it's like, whoa,
There he is.
there he is. Oh God,
He's badass.
yeah, he looks tough.
I wonder how many people he's killed.
Yeah, he looks mean.
And the answer's 0.
0.
Because it was peacetime army.
But also, he's fucking mean as a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
And so he walked over to the formation, and he said something to I think all the Black Hats like even left. Black Hats are the Airborne instructors. They left and went inside. So it was, and you could see up in the windows the other guys who had just graduated. Everybody's looking out like, oh God, what's going to happen out there? And he looked at us, and he said, everybody on your bellies. And do you have 2 D bags or 1? When
2.
Two.
I think you have
Okay.
2. Yeah.
So we're all on our bellies, and he said, low crawl your bags to my truck. And we started low crawl. That took probably 5 minutes to get across the quad to the truck. Threw all the bags on the truck, and he jumped in that. It was a flatbed truck, and he jumped in. He said, keep up. And he just took off. And so we were just running like hell. We have no idea. Like 3rd Battalion could be on, or 75th headquarters could have been on the far side of Fort Benning for all we knew.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it was only a mile and a half or something down the road. But we must have been running about a 6-minute pace behind that truck with no idea how far we're going to go.
Well,
but if you lose the truck,
yeah, you're lost.
what do you do? Like all your stuff is on there. Your next unit is supposedly at the other end of this road. Well,
In the unknown time, unknown distance runs or road marches,
our total mind.
to this day, it's some of the biggest mind fuck you'll ever go through.
Yeah.
I remember even once we were in regiment, like sometimes NCOs would like go on an 8-mile loop.
Yeah.
And then as you're coming through the quad, just keep going.
Keep going right past the barracks.
And we're going to do another
Like,
loop.
what?
Like, whoa, hold.
Or even some of those, not to jump forward too far, but do you remember that miserable deployment in North Carolina where we did an overland movement through a swamp?
Of course.
And it was like we're waist deep in muck and carrying machine guns and no idea how much farther we're going. And it was like, dude, this is the all-time low.
I remember that vividly because
We all had our shirts open.
I was going to say,
It went straight Vietnam style. People had I think Bohannon had like a T-shirt tied around his head.
yeah, that's right.
Oh, dude.
Oh man. So in RIP, and again, the whole purpose of RIP is a 3-week it's 8 weeks now. When we went through, it was 3. And it's a 3-week selection to see if you have what it takes to become a member of the Ranger Regiment. And it sounds pretty short, but when it's
3 weeks of nonstop being screamed at, being smoked. There's actually a little bit of history. Remember, they would run you down to that Coliseum and they would teach Ranger history.
Yep.
And then there was a little bit of classroom learning on land nav before we went to Cole Range.
Yeah.
And Cole Range is where it really gets, I think that first week is like preliminary, you do PT tests, you do the 5-mile run, a lot of the classroom stuff. And then you go to Cole Range for 2 weeks, and Cole Range is where they really like tear into you. And again, you're right. It sounds short, but 14 days or 12 days or however long we're out there, like
holding logs over your head.
Exactly. For anybody at home who's thinking that's short, take 12 days off. Take yourself out in
go
the
in the woods for 12 days.
Exactly. And
sleep 2 hours a night or whatever.
Do nothing but hard physical tasks for 22 hours a day.
Yeah, I remember, like I talked about in my episode 1, was hold the log over your head until 3 people quit.
Yep. And that must be scripted, because I listened to your episode 1 too, and I thought, oh, they did that to us too.
Yeah, of course they did. And it was funny because you wouldn't think that would entice 3 people to quit, but they've been doing this since when?
Since 1974, something like that.
And so they know exactly how to weed out the guys. And I remember they were all nice. They were kind about it. And like Toby just said, RIP is 3 weeks of getting screamed at, told how worthless you are, like you're giving me the ass, like all of this shit coming down on you constantly. Then you get to Cole Range, and there's a moment where they're like, they turn the script. Hey guys, listen.
We got a fire over there in the 55-gallon drum. We got
you can warm
MREs
up.
And hot dogs.
Yeah, let's grill some food, have some warm coffee.
Hot coffee. Yeah.
Like if you don't want to be here, it's totally understandable, and it's no shame in walking away. I'm sure there's someone out there that doesn't think that the Ranger Regiment is for them, and come over, grill up some food, and call it a day. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're speaking to whoever's in that formation that has that switch in their head that quitting is an option, and it was interesting because people ended up quitting, and even sitting there with the log over the head. And I think I went through RIP. I think it was February. So it was freezing in Fort Benning, and it was wet. And at no point was I like, yeah, you know what? Yeah. I'm reaching that point. I think I'm going to quit. It's like, okay, if other dudes are out here, I'm a pussy if I quit. Yeah. And that's it.
I remember, again, because that's still early on, thinking all you have is your imagination. I was thinking, I can keep doing this. I can keep holding this log. I don't know how bad it's going to get, tomorrow, 3 days from now, 8 days from now. But right now, right here, I can keep holding this log.
Yeah.
And that's how I got, and later on down the road, you realize there comes a point where there was a point where I thought, how many more selections could I really go to? Because what do I need to prove at this point? I'm not quitting. I know I'm not quitting. I know I can carry heavy things through the woods. I can read a compass and a map. And how many times would I have to prove this over and over again? It gets a little silly and ridiculous, I think. I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with me. But at that time, this is our first week at Cole Range. And all you know is right here, right now, today, for the next 10 minutes, I can keep going.
Yep.
And I got through RIP. I can keep doing this. I'll keep doing this.
One thing and I use this for basic and Airborne school and RIP and Ranger school, all of them, I would always think about the graduation day. I would think ahead. And I still have them. I made little calendars on pieces of notebook paper. Yeah. And I would X off the day. Yep. So I'd wake up and yes.
Yep. Everybody in Ranger school had
one
a countdown.
more day.
Yeah.
You exit, and then you'd be like, I remember always looking at that graduation date on the end of the calendar and thinking, that day's coming, regardless of what I do. I could be the shittiest ranger. I could quit. I could be honor grad, but that day is coming, and where am I going to be standing on that day? Oh. And I think that's just what always motivated me to not having quitting as even an option.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can go back to childhood too, man. I remember it was like U9 soccer, and I was like, I don't want to play soccer anymore. And my mom said, you started this season. You're going to finish this season. You don't have to play next year. but you're going to finish this one.
What an evil woman.
Right? Yeah. I don't know that would fly today.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, it's like, all right, we're here. And think about how bad you must, like, that. I think later on, like, I realized, like, how bad would you feel, like, when that day comes and now you're not.
That's exactly why I would think about that day.
And so listening to your first episode, it occurred to me that, like, quitting is scary to me. Like, I literally, I don't think I'm capable of it. I guess they say, if you're being beaten in a hostage situation, everybody has a breaking point, but if it's voluntary, I don't know. It's not like I'm so tough I can do all these things. I don't think I have it in me to quit. Quitting is so abhorrent.
Well, and that's a good thing. And I'm reading Dan Crenshaw's book right now, Navy SEAL, who's a senator now. And he talks about how having shame is actually a good thing.
Yes.
Because the thought of quitting or failing or letting somebody down or not doing the right thing, he even references, like, if you walk by a piece of trash on the ground that's next to the garbage can and you just say, next guy will get it, there should be something inside of you that says,
feels bad.
I'm not doing the right thing here. Yeah. And I think a healthy sense of shame is what drives guys like us to not be willing to quit in situations like that. Because, like I've talked about numerous times, I quit wrestling after like 3 or 4 years. And I was it was my freshman year that I quit. And so I would have been 15 years old. I turned 40 in a couple months and I'm still ashamed.
Is that right?
To this day, I'm ashamed because I enjoyed wrestling. And now, as a jiu-jitsu guy and a guy that did the MMA stuff for a while, I know what that foundation would have done for me. So the fact that I walked away from it, it eats away at me all these years later. Yeah. The same thing would have happened if you quit RIP, if you quit Ranger School, if you were a washout in regiment. Like, I'd be an 80-year-old man being like, remember when you couldn't hack it?
Yeah.
And that's good.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of Adam Carolla's podcast, and he says the same thing about shame. Like, we need a little more shame in society. Like, remember when we used to shame deadbeat dads?
Yeah.
Remember when that was a bad thing to not be involved? Now it's like, oh no.
They have a title, deadbeat dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need a little more shame would be healthy in society.
And I think that's why guys like us thrived in the regiment, because it's structured exactly like that. If you're a shithead, it's going to be a problem. And if you're a performer, you're going to be rewarded. It sounds complex on how, like, military units operate and their capabilities and their tactics, but in their core, the most elite units, it's a pretty simple concept. Look out for the guy on your right and left, work hard, do the right thing, and basically just be a performer. And that's not an abstract idea. Yeah. But I guess
the same applies to business. I mean, I'm now a commercial electrician, a foreman, and I tell guys who are struggling on the crew, look, it's easy. Show up on time with the right tools, equipment, and clothing.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so simple.
If you listen to Jocko, he's made probably a multi-million-dollar company using military ideologies and applying them to the business world. Yeah. And it's funny because most of that stuff is like been in military field manuals since the beginning of time. Yeah. But if you can capture that and implore that on people in the private sector, they're doing awesome. Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
And part of that is, you have a job, you can go home at night. So if you underperform for 8 hours, your wife's still going to give you a hug when you get home. Your kids are still going to think you're daddy and whatnot. When you live with your, most, I guess a lot of guys live off post when they reach higher rank, but for us, we lived in the barracks with, there's a lot of peer pressure to perform, and we were not kind to the guys who underperformed. I mean, truly, they were shunned pretty hard.
Yep. No, I mean, that's like not only in something that's like directly related to being a ranger, like tactics or PT, but we all shared 2 washing machines. Yeah. Our laundry was all like just mixed up together. Yeah. And a ranger could be a shithead and just like throw your laundry on the ground, or he could be squared away and like put it in your laundry bag and drop it off at your door. Yeah. Those little things mean a lot
Yeah.
in a platoon and in
Oh,
a platoon size element where everybody's
absolutely.
living on the same floor, you know?
Yep.
And so after we graduated RIP, that's when you get your black beret, you get your Ranger scroll, and that means you're part of the Ranger Regiment now. And you're operational too. The day you graduate RIP, or I should say the day after, when you show up at your whatever battalion you're assigned to, you could deploy to war. And when we went through, it was peacetime Army, and that is part of the reason why the selection process has been extended, because privates were going through RIP and they were showing up and they're like, well, we're going to Afghanistan in a week.
Yeah, not prepared.
Not prepared. And so from what I understand now, it's structured with the 3 weeks of RIP basically followed by 5 weeks of tactics.
Yeah, and that's a really smart change. 'Cause yeah, like you said, you could show up at your unit, or you might even go to your unit that is currently deployed, and they'll tell you, okay, well, hang out for 2 days. We're working on getting you a flight to Afghanistan. You're going to join your new platoon, like operationally. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna meet your team leader, and he's going to tell you to get your shit ready because we're going out at dark.
Yep. And if you don't know how to flow into a room or breach a door or
Which,
set up
to be
a
honest,
patrol
after
base,
5 weeks, you don't.
No, of course
But
not.
at least you have
Some exposure to
yeah,
it.
and
You know,
for everybody panicking at home, they don't put new privates on the breach team. They're going to be
Yeah.
carrying a litter or carrying some breaching tools somewhere in the back. There's a combat mission has the guys who kick down the door and fight the fight, but there's the rest of the platoon. You can have a pretty boring night on an objective while another squad in your platoon is rocking and rolling.
Yeah, for sure.
And it rotates. So, if one squad's the main effort one night, another squad might be the main effort the next.
So you typically spend 6 to 9 months as a private in Ranger Regiment.
Yeah, it's sort of a probationary status. You're there, you're in the unit, you're deploying, you're participating in all training, but you're being evaluated.
And it's very easy to let you go as a private.
Yes.
If you don't cut the mustard,
It's a single piece of paper.
yeah, see ya. And in 2nd Battalion at Fort Lewis, where we were at, they called it sending you down the street or down the road, because there was other infantry units that are non-performers would just literally be sent down the road. Today, you're part of 2nd Ranger Battalion. Tomorrow, you're part of, 3rd ID or Stryker Brigade?
I think it was 2nd ID.
2nd ID?
Or maybe it was 25th. I think there was 2nd ID and 25th ID both at Lewis.
And the interesting thing about that is the guys that get kicked out of regiment and go down the road, a lot of times are some of the best soldiers in their units. I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Especially if, I guess it depends on what they get kicked out for. If it's an alcohol-related incident or a fight or something like that, they could still be a stud that just made a bad decision and now they're kicked out of the regiment.
Yep.
But for the guys that fail their PT or whatever, like, same thing. They go down to these other units. And it's weird because those other units, they don't have anywhere to send their shit bags.
Exactly.
They're stuck with them.
Yes.
So you get a guy that has a bad attitude, and you know how it is in any type of operational element. A guy that is a non-performer or a guy that has a bad attitude, that shit's a cancer.
Yes. Can you imagine a year-long deployment to Iraq with a shitbag private who you just can't?
I can't even imagine it.
Dude.
I always tell people the 3 things that make the Ranger Regiment better than regular infantry units is that, first of all, it's all volunteer to be there. So you have to volunteer to go above and beyond what everybody else went through just to show up. Secondly, we get funded. Like, training budget is basically unlimited, right? As many hours on Blackhawks, as many rounds as you want to shoot, as many fast ropes, as many jumps.
Spendexes at the end of the year where it's like, we've got all this extra ammo that we didn't use this year. So we need to use the screwy thing about the way the government works is, well, we budgeted you, I don't know, 1.2 million 5.56 rounds this year. You only shot 1 million. So if you don't use all 1.2, you won't get 1.2 the next year. So
go out to the range.
Leading into the end of the fiscal year, we called them spendexes, spending exercises. So we went out to the range and we threw hand grenades until our shoulders were about to fall off. We fired anti-tank rockets. We
smoke grenades.
Smoke grenade. I mean, dude, we were wrapping up balls of C4 just to see how big of an explosion we could make. The shit got crazy.
And so with that kind of training budget, you already got guys that want to be there. And then, I mean, training is everything. Like the more you train, the more proficient you're going to become.
And you'd start to like it. Just like I said, like on the football team, the guys who love it, they come to even though football practice sucks, it's like, I couldn't wait for football practice to start in the fall. You start to really like that Army training. And like, it's like, well, I could be doing other things, but I'm standing here with like my team leader and my squad leader who are gods in my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm holding literally like the most advanced assault rifle for the time with all the most advanced
With
optics.
a PEC 2 on it.
PEC 2, and I'd never seen a red dot. This is 1999, early 2000. I'd never seen a red dot sight before. How many people had seen a red dot sight before? We were the only unit on Fort Lewis wearing body armor. So when we had that, was it range 7 that we could walk to? It was only like 3/4 of a mile or so. So we'd go walking out the gate of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, and there were other units, kind of out doing PT or driving up and down the road, and we'd just be walking down the street. And also, I don't know if those guys could just walk down the street carrying a weapon. I think they had to be in formation
there
with a
so
NCOIC,
many things.
and a squad could just go draw weapons, put on their body armor, and walk over to range 7. And nobody else on Fort Lewis had M4s. Everybody still had the old M16 A2, and nobody else was wearing body armor. They probably were like, what the hell is that shit they're wearing?
Yeah. And so before I forget, the third thing that I wanted to talk about, or I wanted to just mention that makes the Ranger Battalion better, is the ability to fire people.
Yeah.
Your non-performers are gone.
Yes.
So a combination of those 2 things, you volunteer, you have unlimited training budget, and your non-performers are gone. Of course, it's going to be an awesome unit.
Because you're left with people who want to be there and get up and work hard to stay there. You have to work hard to stay there. There is no point where you're here and you've made it. Every day you have to work hard to stay.
So your time in Ranger Battalion as a private is hard.
Yes.
And especially when we went through, and we'll talk about how that shifted, but when we showed up, it was still hazing. It was still privates being treated like shit. You're getting tab checked all the time, and you're doing all the shitty details. But you don't realize how good we had it until you hear the stories of some guys that did get fired or did quit. I had a buddy who was in Bravo Company who went through the whole process with me, and we went up to 2nd Battalion together, and then he had a team leader that was like a dick to him, and he quit.
Yeah.
And he got sent to the 101st.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if he called me or he emailed me, but he's like, you're not going to believe this. When you're done training at the range, you all go to a weapons cleaning table, and an NCO talks you through the numbers on cleaning your weapon.
Dude.
And he's like, all right, take the lower receiver off. All right, pull your bolt out. And everything is done synchronized with your squad.
This takes me back to the Army can also be the worst experience of your life.
And he's to a guy that grew up in Ranger Regiment, that's the most asinine thing you've ever heard, because what we did is we'd be done at the range. We'd go upstairs to our bedrooms. We'd put on Braveheart or Commando or some.
That's right. Commando. It was always Schwarzenegger. Sergeant Lynch had to have Schwarzenegger.
Schwarzenegger or Mel Gibson. The Patriot. Like these cool movies where like guys are getting after it.
Yeah.
We'd order a pizza. We'd have some beers. And we'd just sit there and clean our weapons and talk shit and have fun.
We'd shut the doors to the squad room. So you know what I mean? We were sort of isolated in there as a squad. Order like 3 pizzas, get a 30-pack of Busch Light, put on a movie, and just shoot the shit and clean weapons and kind of hang out. It was hangout time.
And I can't imagine having to do that any other way. But that's the kind of stuff that the regular Army, you can't have your weapon in your bedroom in the barracks. Wow. Like our weapons were in our bedrooms more than they were in the arms room, I'd say. We would draw our weapons every morning just to do dry fire drills.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I don't think in the Army you can just go draw your weapon. In Ranger Battalion, when I made team leader, I would say, okay, remember we'd have a lot of downtime where you were waiting for the platoon sergeant to get with the squad leaders and whatnot, and I would say, okay, after breakfast, we're drawing weapons and we're dry firing until Michaelis comes and gets us and tells us what we're doing. We're just going to go out back. We'll do dry mag changes, dry fires, ready ups.
And if you're a saw gunner, enjoy yourself because you're going to be smoked.
Your left shoulder is going to be really strong.
And for anybody listening, me and Toby were both saw gunners in 2nd Squad for the whole time we were Tab Spec 4s, right?
I remember I drew the short straw and got RTO duty for like 3.5 months.
So yeah, then you do your time as a private, and once you have proven yourself and they like you and they know that they want to promote you and put you into a leadership position, that's when the Ranger Regiment says, we're going to send you to Ranger School. And this is something that is, I'm probably not going to shed any light that's going to clarify this at all. But people think, oh, Army Ranger, he's been through Ranger School. And I'm not here to say what somebody is or what they aren't if they've been through Ranger School. But how the Ranger Regiment works, it has Ranger Regiment and Ranger School literally have nothing to do with each other. It's different commands. It's literally, one's an Army school and one is a unit that is trained and ready to deploy to combat.
Yeah. The Ranger Regiment is a special operations capable unit organized under JSOC.
Mm-hmm.
Ranger School is a infantryman's leadership training course organized under the Army's Training and Doctrine Command. The same command that runs basic training runs Ranger School. And there is nothing, Ranger School is a great school. I have nothing, we may get into this at length, but I can, it was a really good training, but it is not special operations.
Nope.
It's infantry. It is basic infantry leadership.
But the one thing that does tie it together with Ranger Regiment is you have to pass that school in order to make any type of promotion in the Ranger Regiment. You are a private in the Ranger Regiment no matter what until you have your Ranger tab.
To say you could be an untabbed E4 and you're a private.
Yeah,
and
you're a
the
PV4.
E5s,
Yeah.
There were a few support job E5s that did not have a tab, and they were given marginal respect, but it was kind of like, yeah, but you're a bitch.
Yeah, and you're our supply guy, or you came in as a cook.
Yeah, commo support. Something
Hey,
like that.
go get your tab.
Yeah. They were pressured to go.
Go. Yeah, you're gonna. We don't care what your MOS is. If you want to be part of the regiment, go get your tab. And I tell people all the time, like, remember Mirtha?
Yes.
Like when we were in Afghanistan, we could take our cook out on patrols if we wanted to.
We did. We took him out.
You know, hey man, grab your stuff. We're gonna go out for 6 days or whatever.
So I guess you guys took him out to that downed aircraft, and I just have a visual from everybody coming back, laughing that I don't know if he'd been in the field much. And they're like, yeah, he just sat and smoked cigarettes under a poncho and looked miserable as fuck the entire time.
But hey, he's out there doing it. And if your MOS is a cook, you're probably not doing that stuff with other units.
No, absolutely not.
And so we both did. I don't remember how long it was before I went to Ranger School. You said you went at 6 months, right?
I was right at 6 months.
Okay.
Maybe even a week or two shy of that.
And again, it was because your 2 mile time was 11:30 or whatever.
No, I think I ran it in like 11:02, and I remember Sergeant Lynch being like, 11:02, 3 more seconds, you could have broke 11, shitbag.
Yeah, that's flying.
Yeah.
That's flying, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's get into this again because Toby had a legendary
extended
vacation at Ranger School.
I got to know Ranger School real well.
Yeah, he was, we joke, like, he was probably friends with the cadre by the time he was done with it. Hey, what's up, Toby? Yeah, let's take a quick break, and then we'll get right into Ranger School.
Word.
All right, so you went to Ranger School a couple months ahead of me, and basically what Ranger School, how it's structured is it's 3 phases. You start out at Fort Benning, Georgia, and it's the Darby phase, and that's where you do your 5 mile run, your PT test. It's really geared towards kind of smoking you and thrashing you, not as much as patrolling, which you get into in the later phases. And each phase is, 3 weeks. And what it is it's a leadership school, like Toby just mentioned, and everybody takes turns filling different leadership positions. And it's squad leaders, platoon sergeants, and platoon leaders. And you're expected to step up and lead patrols in these different positions. And when you go there, everybody is stripped of their rank. So you could be a private, or you could be a captain or a sergeant. I think there was a sergeant major that went through at one point.
Right? Oh, wow.
And it doesn't matter where you come from or who you are. Everybody is equal, and you're all expected to perform the same. And it's divided up into, when we went through, it was 3 phases. It's Darby and then mountains and then Florida, which is down in the swamps of Florida. Shortly before we went through, they had a 4th phase, which was desert phase. And the Army, in their infinite wisdom, decided to get rid of desert phase.
Go figure.
Even though that's the majority of the fighting has taken place in the last 20 years.
Right.
But yeah, talk us through when you went down to Ranger School and kind of how that process started with pre-Ranger.
Yeah, so we start with pre-Ranger, which is a course run by the 75th for privates who are headed to Ranger School. And so you tack on another, you remember I said Ranger School is 67 days because of 0 week. You actually tack on another 3 weeks because you're back in the RIP barracks just at the other end of the hallway with those same RIP instructors yelling and screaming at you again. And it's almost like Darby phase. You do almost the same. It's squad level patrolling, and the idea is to give you a little bit of a train up before you go to Ranger School, and then unlike Ranger School, they give you a little more sleep, and they actually force feed you. They try to get everybody to gain 5 or 10 pounds because they know you're going to lose 30 over the next 67 days. So anyway, went through pre-Ranger, and then went through Darby, first time go through Darby, into mountains, and I had actually had a platoon sergeant patrol that went really well, so I was stoked. Going into the you're going into the second field problem at mountains, knowing that I most likely have a primary go, which is really important if you're listening and don't know what that means. One of you might do 9 or 10 patrols where you are in a leadership position during the 3 phases. You have to get a go in every phase, and one of those goes has to be as either the platoon leader or the platoon sergeant, the 2 senior people in the platoon. So that primary go is a big deal, to have that locked up and know that it's just one more box that you've checked as you're moving through the school.
And to expound on that a little bit, once you have your primary go, you know that you're good. And so your focus can shift from, am I going to make it? Am I going to pass my patrols, to I'm going to help my buddies pass their patrols.
Exactly. I'll carry the 240 for you. Give me the extra rounds. I'll carry all that heavy shit. You go ahead and do your thing.
And an important aspect of Ranger School that they preach is like, you don't get your own go. Yeah. Your Ranger buddies get your go for you, and then you get your Ranger buddies their goes. And that's by being a good Ranger. It goes back to what we talked about when we first started. Being a team player, looking out for each other, doing the right thing. If you do those things at Ranger School, the patrols go easy. But if you get guys that are like, I'm fucking tired, and falling asleep in their patrol base.
If you screw someone when they're in leadership, your squad notices, and they will, when it's your turn, they won't perform for you.
Yep.
And you actually have peer reviews at the end of every phase too, where you have to rank everybody in your squad 1 through 9. And if someone gets too low of a score, like if the same guy is ending up as number 9 on everybody's list, that guy's gone.
Yep. Yeah. Then that's such a powerful tool that, I mean, I don't know how you can implement that in the private sector, but
that's discrimination, Greg.
but I always tell people that the people that really know who your non-performers are the guys that are in the trenches with you.
Yes.
And a lot of times supervisors and managers, they can have the wool pulled over their eyes, and they don't really know how people really are down like in their core. Yeah. But the dudes that are in, like I said, in the trenches with that person, they know them intimately, and your shitbags come to light very quickly in Ranger School.
Yes. Because you're under duress. I mean, the whole point of the school is to put you under stress and duress by limiting your sleep and your food and keeping you physically active. And you're everybody who's there, again, wants to be there. You're wanting to pass. So you've got some stress that you're placing on yourself, and add into that. And the patrols, spoiler alert, they never go well. The instructors make a point of throwing every kind of, just when you think things are going smoothly, they're going to toss an RD sim in there and blow everybody out of there. And now you've got guys scattered throughout the woods. You've still got to make your time hacks. You got to get everybody rounded back up.
You lost accountability, your man.
Get back on course. Yeah, somebody dropped their fucking nods. Now you've got to go. You know what I mean? It just goes on and on. So anyway, and looking back on it, man, it was so dumb. Like we were in the chow hall at Dahlonega, 5th Ranger Battalion or Ranger Training Battalion, eating breakfast, and then we're getting on Blackhawks to start the second field problem. And I had a leftover, one of those little jelly packet deals. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to stick this thing in my pocket. Because at some point I'm going to have, and your mind is so wasted at that point. I was like, I'm going to have peanut butter and crackers in an MRE, and I'm going to make peanut butter and jelly crackers. And when you're that, like, that mindset when you're just sort of deprived and beat down, like that peanut butter and jelly instead of peanut butter is dude, it is like.
In Ranger School, you fantasize about food harder than any woman you've ever fantasized about. I mean, I remember sitting in patrol bases with the person in the foxhole next to me and be like, I can't wait for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And you would start talking about mom's cooking and turkey, and like you could have a conversation about food that would last 45 minutes.
You make lists of the restaurants you're going to, okay, as soon as we get out of Fort Benning, we're going to whatever, we're going to the Chili's or TGI Fridays, and then, okay, I'm going to get this burger and a milkshake. And then, okay, and then from there, we're going over to Azteca, or like, it's like 10,000 calories. They're like, oh, we're going to eat this before we go to bed on the day.
No, man, that's like, I forget what they give you. It's 1 or 2 MREs a day, right?
It's 1.
Is it 1?
I think it's 1.
And that may sound like a lot when you're thinking about like how many calories come in that, but you also have to take into account you're getting 0 to 2 to maybe 3 hours of sleep a night.
Extreme physical activity.
And the other 21 hours of the day, you have a ruck on your back and you're walking through the woods.
Yeah. Sometimes running.
Yeah. So however many calories you do get, even if it's like, oh, MRE has 2,000 calories or whatever. Yeah. But when you do the math about calories in versus calories out, you're starving to death.
And I lost 20 pounds, I think.
And for people that are just listening, Foulke doesn't have 20 pounds to lose.
No, I don't. And that was when I was 20. I was skinny. Yeah. So anyway, I kept this jelly packet and I stuffed it in the bottom of my rucksack, and we got out to the airfield and they said, okay, amnesty, whatever you have in your rucksacks, get all the extra shit out. We know somebody's got something.
So did they do an amnesty dump just by chance, or do you think someone saw you?
I don't think they saw me.
Okay.
I think it was
just a random.
I think before every field problem they do an amnesty dump. So anyway, I was like, oh, they'll never find it, and they found it. So then, because I'm like the 4,000th kid come through there. It was like they'll never find it.
Yeah, exactly.
They know exactly where to look. So they pulled me out of formation, took me up to the battalion commander, and he said, okay, you're done with this class. And that was like crushing, man, because again, like that fear of quitting, like it's almost the same thing. You don't go back to the regiment without your tab.
No, if you fail Ranger School, you don't get to be part of the regiment anymore.
Exactly.
Unless it's extenuating circumstances, meaning you got injured or you had a family emergency. But if you just fail because you failed your patrols, or in your case, that would be considered an integrity violation.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah.
And so everything that you've worked for, everybody you know, where you live,
your best friends are in the platoon.
Everything is going to shit at that moment.
Yep. And so he said, he looked at me, he goes, okay, here's the deal. If you hump your ruck back to Fort Benning, I'll give you a day 1 recycle. And I was like, oh boy, they must have some route planned out or something where they're going to drive a truck along some back road, and I'm going to walk all the way back to I'm going to take a week and walk back to Fort Benning.
And I said, that's okay. What I was going to say. What is that? Hundreds of miles?
I have no idea. I couldn't tell you Dahlonega to Fort Benning without looking at a map. But I said, okay, I'll do that. Which they put me on a bus and drove me back. But day 1,
he just wanted to see if you were willing to do it. Huh?
Yeah. Day 1 recycle, 0 week again, which is a full fucking week, and then back through mountains. This time I recycled mountains on patrols. So, and then going into that recycle, that was when the training battalion went on their 2-week block leave. So not only was there a 1-week break that normally comes between the classes, there was another like 2.5 weeks. So I was just sitting up there in Dahlonega for almost 4 weeks. And I talked about this last time, that sucked, but that was where Rick Barraza recycled that class too. And so he and I became really tight during that recycle time, because all we had to do was hang out and tell stories, and like knew everything about each other's lives and growing up and like high school and middle school and stuff like that. And we had he had sweet, the training battalion was on their block leave, so there was only a few, they leave behind a few staff duty, E5s and privates who are part of the OP4 guys. And he had sweet talked one of them, and that dude would, anytime he was going into town, we'd give him cash, and he'd bring us beer and cigarettes and hide them in the little creek out behind the barracks there at 5th RTB. And so we'd wait till lights out and everybody, the camp was quiet, and then he and I would just walk down and sit by the river and drink beer in Dahlonega, which actually, if you think about it, not too bad a way to spend 2 weeks.
There could be worse. There could be worse duty.
Yeah. So anyway.
Now, what a blessing in disguise that was, though, because Rick Barraza ended up being killed in action in 2006 in Ramadi.
Yep.
And like I'd mentioned before, I always knew you guys were real close and you were homies, but I didn't know that was forged in mountains holdover together.
Yeah. Literally the two of us just sitting in a giant platoon squad bay shooting the breeze for 3 weeks.
So then you recycled mountains, went through it again, got your go.
Passed, went to Florida. And it's crazy, man. You don't remember, or at least I don't remember much about Florida, because even though I'd had that 3-week break, by the time you go through mountains again and then you're into Florida, I was already I gained some weight during the recycle. We're just sitting around. But then I once again, by the time I graduated after Florida, I was back, minus 15 or 20. In Florida, I was so just wasted away. Like, I have very few memories. I can remember being up to my nipples in water and, wading through the swamps and just kind of being miserable and tired. And we came out of the swamps after in Florida, it's not split up. It's just one long field problem when you go into the swamps.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And so you come out and you do that long walk back to Camp Rudder. And they put us into 2 lines, and they're calling people, one line is going, there are 2 doors into the office, and so guys are going in the 2 doors. And some guys are coming out looking really happy out of the door on the right, and the guys who are coming out of the door on the left are looking pretty dejected, and I'm in the line on the left. And I was like, oh my God.
Not again.
I have to go do Florida again. And so I went in, sat down to talk to the RI. He says, okay, you're recycled, right? I said, man, because I had 3 patrols, and I had a really good one. And I said, man, that second patrol, my platoon sergeant patrol went really well. And he's like, you didn't have a platoon sergeant patrol? I said, yeah, I did. And he pulled out my file again, and 2 pages had stuck together, and he opened them up, and he said, oh, shit, man, you're good. You're graduating. Congratulations.
Get out of my office.
Exactly. And dude, I about fucking floated out of there.
I can imagine, dude.
You remember they had those little, so once you're done, they have those little lunch bags that you can buy for like $5, and it's got like 2 hot dogs, a Snickers, and a Coke in there. Of course I remember that. And you eat that, and it makes you so sick, and everybody's just laying on the lawn going,
but it feels so good at the same time.
Maybe I should go in and buy a Klondike bar.
Yeah, I remember everyone has like their phases that they enjoyed and the phases that they hated. For me, mountains, I hated mountains because it was literally mountains. You're walking up and down steep terrain day and night. And I just remember like everybody has that point in time in Ranger School where they're like delirious and trying to eat pine cones and call their girlfriends with a stick and like all this.
They're looking for their rucksack that's on their back.
All
panicking. I can't find my ruck.
All this bizarre stuff starts happening. That was mountains for me. Yeah. And that's because mountains was physically a lot harder for me.
I hated
just
mountains
the terrain
because I did it 3 times.
I can't even imagine doing mountains 3 times.
So I definitely hated the fun. Like I said, I don't really remember Florida.
See, when I went to Florida, like we talked about before, I waterproofed my ruck properly. And I remember, to this day, I was like, oh, if I waterproof my ruck very well, a lot of the patrols are in deep enough water where it floats behind you and it takes the weight off your shoulders. And that alone is like, yeah, I graduated at 9/11. It was September 11th, 2001 on our last day. So the majority of our experience in Ranger School was during the summer months and it was warm. So I was down to be in water all day up to my neck. And again, like me and Foulke are both 6 foot, 6'1", some of that water you're patrolling in, you're like on your tiptoes trying to breathe.
Yeah.
So I don't know how guys like Casey Castro and Jesse Hash managed, but
Hash was plenty buoyant.
Shout out to you guys.
Even 20 pounds down in Ranger School, Hash floated real well.
But yeah, so when it was all said and done, you were in Ranger School for what, literally 6
God,
months?
I think it was 6 months.
Oh man.
Brutal.
And then, yeah, like I said, when you graduated Ranger School and went back to regiment, I was already beginning Ranger School, or I was halfway through, or wherever I was
you
at.
And Cody Knight were gone. So it was, and actually I think Mata had moved to a different unit. So it was like my 3 best friends from the squad were not there. It was kind of, but at least like, you know, Castro and I had gotten to be good buddies at pre-Ranger and through the beginning of Ranger School, and Barraza graduated with me. Yeah, actually Barraza and I, that's where we, again, you know, continued to be really tight. Because we'd compete. It was rare that 2 platoons would be on the same range at the same time, but when we did the bigger deployments, you know, you'd have the whole company out there, and it was like, oh, we were talking shit the entire time. Who could shoot better? Who's a better saw gunner? Who can reload faster? All the things that make you better at your job.
Yeah.
But also makes you tighter with the guy you're talking shit to and competing with.
Yeah, of course, man. And so I graduated on 9/11. And I was getting ready to jump back into Fort Benning, and they pulled us all in, and we were under attack.
Yeah.
And I saw they showed us the planes hitting the towers, and at that moment, we're literally had been starved and sleep deprived for the last 2.5 months, and like, okay, peacetime military is over.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the students saying, "We're going to war," and the cadre is like, "Shut up, Ranger. You're not, you don't know what you're doing. You ain't going to war," you know? Yeah. And we were deployed to Jordan, literally, like I got home.
October.
Yeah, I got home and was deployed like a week later. Yeah. And so it took me a while to get home from Fort Benning because all the planes were shut down and no one could fly anywhere. So I was held over there for a little bit. It was just me and Doc Poe. We pinned our Ranger tabs on each other and then just hung out waiting to get back to Fort Lewis. And then when we did, it was like turn and burn. All right, you guys are deploying to Amman, Jordan. And that deployment was already slotted on the books. It was going to be a training deployment.
Yes.
And once we got there, it was brought to our attention, hey, the Ranger Regiment is going to invade Afghanistan. 3rd Battalion is going to jump onto Objective Rhino, which was a small airfield. And since Alpha Company 2nd Battalion is already in the Middle East, we're going to attach you guys to this mission. And so it was understood that it was going to be a battalion plus Alpha Company from 2nd Battalion that was going to seize this airfield. There was going to be a combat jump. And then we were going to seize the airfield. The Marine Corps was going to land there. And then they were going to convoy up to Kandahar Airfield and seize that large airfield. And then that ended up becoming the biggest operating base in Afghanistan, even to this day, I think right?
So, yeah.
And so we were getting, I think it was, I don't know how many hours before the mission was supposed to kick off, but it
might have been like 48 or 70. We were not, we were not like getting on birds and loading magazines at that point. And I have a slightly different memory. I remember it being a company size objective that was later upgraded to a battalion size objective. But either way, it kind of plays out the same.
Well, we were at one point in time, we were supposed to be jumping in.
We were in, yeah.
And then they canceled the 2nd Battalion attachment. And so, you go from, talk about you're missing the invasion of Afghanistan. And, like we joked about before, I think one guy got shot on the objective. They killed one enemy KIA.
They killed the guy who was the paid asset who opened the gate. And I think it was a staff officer who shot him.
And I heard every Ranger that walked by him put a couple rounds in him since this was the first combat engagement since 1993. Yeah. But regardless of how much resistance they met or did not meet, you getting a mustard stain, jumping into Afghanistan as part of the invasion.
Oh, everybody was green with envy.
It would have been
everybody
a
in 1st and
legendary
2nd Battalion
mission to be a part of.
Yeah.
And we were that close. And I remember our first sergeant throwing stuff around the talk and swearing when he found out that our company was getting cut from the mission, because that's everything you train to do. And again, it's as a Ranger battalion, it's day in and day out training hard for combat. And then when the situation arises, especially 9/11, because we were attacked, civilians were killed. So everyone in the Ranger Regiment was fired up to deploy.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
And it wasn't until that moment that I was fired up to deploy, to tell you the truth. Like, there was a lot of Rangers that were like, I can't wait to shoot someone in the face.
You were also recovering from Ranger School, which takes
that's
months. True. Like it takes a long time to, like, you have to regain your weight. Like your cardio conditioning is just shot. Your muscle strength is shot. It takes a long time to recover from Ranger School. So I was at the barracks when 9/11 happened. Everybody there we were in formation within an hour, thinking we're getting on a bird. We're going to get on the trucks, go over to McCord Air Force Base and get on a plane right now. So everybody was primed by the time we got to Jordan in October.
Man. And like throughout Ranger history, like Grenada and Panama, like some of those things were kind of like
they just kind of popped up.
And
yeah,
boom,
at the planning level, they'd probably been talking about it for a week or two. But by the time it gets down to the infantrymen at Fort Lewis, you're getting 48 hours notice,
And so we ended up missing that invasion and listening to it on
I don't know if we, probably wasn't the talk.
No. That was
Iraq.
Yep. I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah. If you were listening, we missed 2 invasions. we were the lucky company that just kept missing out. God. But, I remember, 3rd Battalion invaded Afghanistan that night, and a Black Hawk went down, and one of your Ranger buddies was killed.
John Edmonds.
Yep. And we kept thinking maybe we'll get used for follow-on missions, and we didn't. They redeployed us back home to the States.
That's right.
And we didn't go back to Afghanistan. And we tried to hash this out last time. I don't remember the exact timeline, but
it was spring of 2002, because it was after
Roberts Ridge. That's right. And so we ended up deploying to Afghanistan for the first time as a as a platoon, because we were attached to Charlie Company. So
nope, that was 2nd deployment. First deployment, we went
as a company.
That's
right. So Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, deployed in spring of 2002, and we were just a QRF billet the entire time, basically.
Just sitting in the dirt in Kandahar.
And a QRF is Quick Reaction Force, which means you are on an airfield, your mags are loaded, your equipment's prepped, your water's filled, and you're literally just sitting on an airfield waiting for either an aircraft to go down or troops to get in contact that need additional troops. And it's a weird way to exist, because you're waiting for something bad to happen, which you don't necessarily want to happen, but at the same time, you want to be outside of the wire,
just bored out of our minds,
doing the Ranger mission. And so before everyone had cell phones and internet, there was
Tetris.
There was Tetris, and there
Maxim
was
magazine.
and
a prison gym that we made. So I guess Kandahar has turned into almost like a military installation. In the spring of 2002, it was a handful of tents in the dirt around the runway.
Yep.
And so if you wanted to exercise, you just went out in the dirt, and we had like some rebar. We did have a few like actual plates and like just a rusted out bench or something. And then pretty much everything else was stuff that guys kind of made out of cinder blocks and rocks, and
and just make it work. Remember, we had a Cobra, not the helicopter, the snake that lived in the compound.
Oh God, that's right.
It lived in the crack in one of the walls, and everyone wanted to get that Cobra, but it would they'd see it, and then it'd slither back into the wall. So we're just living out in a dusty tent with a Cobra. The Cobra was living in a crack in the wall right by the piss tubes.
That's right. Yeah.
So that whole deployment, we only got utilized once as a QRF element, and that was for the C-130 that went down. And they had a C-130 go down, and at the time, we had no idea. Was it enemy engagement? Was it shot down? Was it pilot error? And all you know is, I mean, you're given what a not even 5 minute, a couple minute briefing.
You're told grab your crap.
Yeah.
The C-130 went down, and the messed up thing about that was that about 3 hours prior to that, remember, first squad had departed for Lawara.
That's
on
right.
a C-130.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden we're hearing C-130 down. Everybody grab your shit. We're getting on birds, and you're thinking, oh God, that's Hash, that's Dave Lane, that's Heath Smith, Mark Boyning,
all of our buddies.
The time, we don't know. We're just grunts. We don't know how many aircraft are flying around the country. So we're getting on those Chinooks, thinking we're going out to recover our friends.
And like it ended up not being our friends, but it was somebody's friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember when we're flying in, and it's the middle of the night, and we're being taken in on CH-47 Chinooks with the 160th, who are flying under nods, and we don't know what we're getting into. We don't know if we're gonna land, and when the ramp opens, it's Saving Private Ryan, and there's follow-on attacks, or if there's gonna be nothing. And I remember flying in there.
The whiteboard.
Yeah, the whiteboard. We had 2 birds flying in, and so 2 chalks. And contrary to what you see on the movies, there's not really conversation happening on an infill. Those helicopters are so loud, and they're whining, and there's hydraulic fluid dripping everywhere. And you're not going to have a conversation on a helicopter, but they passed around a whiteboard, and it said, chalk 1 down.
Yeah. No details. Just the little board comes around, says chalk 1 down.
And I was like, oh, I guess chalk 2, which was us, is going to continue on the mission.
Yeah. Chalk 2, Charlie Mike.
But, when one aircraft was already confirmed down, and then you get that chalk 1 down too, you're like, oh, okay, well,
we're headed into something.
I'm going to die right now.
Yeah.
Now chalk 2 is probably going to be shot down. And as we were coming in, the aircraft started spinning, like almost it felt out of control. And they started shooting their chaff and their flares. And what that means is they'll do that because any type of anti-aircraft artillery that has heat-seeking capabilities, if it locks on to the helicopter's heat signature and they shoot flares that move away from the helicopter, it can attract those anti-aircraft munitions to chase the flares as opposed to chasing the helicopter. And we saw those going off, and I was like, oh, okay, we're getting shot down now. Yeah. And it wasn't until after that mission that I talked to some of the 160th guys, and they're like, no, that's just precaution.
Just standard.
Yeah, when we're landing
we forgot to let you guys know
when we're landing on a hot LZ, we shoot our chaff. And then they also said, and that landing tactic where they're spinning and coming in hard, they call it a controlled crash. Oh. And they're just trying to get out of the air as fast as possible and make it difficult to be a target.
For us to be machine gunned as we run
yeah,
out
exactly.
there. Yeah.
And so, I guess some of that would have been nice to know going in, but we thought that we were 100% getting engaged by the enemy as we were landing. And then we got off the aircraft, and all you could see was like smoke and fire, and it was nighttime. And you could see the C-130 where it had impacted on the side of this mountain. Everything was engulfed in flames, and the aircraft had actually melted and was running down the mountain in like a stream of molten metal.
The only thing that was recognizable as an aircraft were the propellers.
Yep.
Everything else had completely melted, and it was like the Terminator from T2.
That's right. Yep.
Rivulets of silver aluminum just running down the side of this mountain.
And again, there was Humvees on that aircraft.
Yeah.
That were also MIA.
Yeah.
There was no Humvees there.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a physicist, but from my personal experience, jet fuel can melt metal.
Yeah. I mean, after the fires went out, there was a pile of rubble and twisted shit. You know what I mean? But yeah.
And so we ended up setting up a perimeter, and our guys just started recovering bodies, pulling them out of the wreckage. And I don't know how long it had been between impact and when we got there.
I think it had been an hour, because I think they said a flight of PJs had taken off from somewhere closer and had taken out a couple of
survivors.
Remember, we were only recovering bodies.
Yep. No, that's right. And so, but again, that intel didn't make it to us.
We didn't know that until the
after
next
the
morning.
fact.
We had been there 8 hours before they said, "Oh, by the way,
There were some survivors."
yeah, so a couple of guys survived the crash and were exfilled by pararescuemen.
And that's such, I mean, not to go off on a tangent, but it's such a misconception that people think like the military is this finely oiled machine where everybody's talking and everybody's up to speed. I mean, I remember a mission in Iraq where I was on the other side of a river. We were on the other side of the Euphrates River from a Marine Corps element, and we were both engaging the same target. We identified some Al-Qaeda guys that were like straight up had masks and AK-47s.
Yeah.
And once the shooting was stopped, I was like, "Hey, get up on comms with those guys." We don't know who those guys are. What? I'm looking at them. Yeah, we don't know who they are. Yeah. I'm not sure what base that patrol's out of. And we never got connected with them. We never have any idea.
Yeah. Later when I worked for OGA, I can remember going into the talk of like the battle space talk in Mosul or in Hilla and asking if I could get ComSec into our radios so that we could get up on their frequencies and if we needed to get a hold of the military units. And sometimes yes, but then sometimes you got no 5. It's like, I'm not giving you our ComSec.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, see ya.
Have a good one. Yeah. So we ended up recovering, I don't even remember, was it like 7 bodies or something?
I don't remember. Yeah, I was a saw gunner, so I was out on the perimeter.
Yeah. But we ended up pulling the guys out of, and I was a saw gunner as well, so I wasn't digging through the fire, but our Ranger buddies were. Recovered a handful of bodies, and because they had been charred and been cooking for the last hour, they were literally falling apart as they were being pulled out.
And some of, I mean, they'd been dismembered in the crashes.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like trying to figure out what body parts went into what body bag was not. It's not something you're going to do in the moment because we are still in hostile territory. We don't know why this plane crashed. We don't know anything.
Yep.
And it was even if we had all the time in the world, we still wouldn't have been able to figure it out.
And then like anybody that's operated under nods with a fire going. So, I mean, not only can you not see because it's dark, but now your nods are going to be whited out too. And so the guys did the best they could. And I guess they ended up mixing up a bunch of different bodies in the body bags. And obviously that wasn't anybody's fault. That was just the dynamics of what was taking place on the ground. And when we got back to Kandahar Airfield the following day, and the bodies were taken to the morgue on base, a female officer came down and kind of chewed our asses. And like you mentioned, ended up giving us a class on body recovery operations because she was upset that some of the bags contained 2 left hands and no head or whatever it was. Yeah. And I remember her saying, I'll never forget this. She's like, it's our job to send remains home to their families. And how's that going to look if you sent a body bag home that had 2 left hands in it? How are their loved ones going to feel about that?
That's what you're here for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Next time you can go out under nods in the middle of the night and pull people out of burning wreckage and make sure that they're all packaged perfectly.
Yeah. And just so nobody's concerned, Chalk 1, mechanical difficulty. They joined us later, 10 minutes later. Yeah. They just didn't bother to tell us. Again, all we got was Chalk 1 down.
Yeah, Chalk 1 was good to go. So that was really the only mission of that whole 90-day deployment. And then we redeployed home, went through another training cycle where I'm sure we did a fixed wing, rotary wing, 10,000 round or iterations at the shoot house.
I was going to say, is that when we ended up in North Carolina?
Yep, we did. We did a training cycle where the CAG guys took us out on their ranges and got us up to speed on a lot of
PLDC.
stuff.
I ended up getting out of PLDC like 3 days early so I could deploy.
Okay.
So that's right, because we both made E5, had to go through PLDC, and then, it was just a bunch of training deployments to hit shoot houses.
Yep.
And,
So if you didn't complete the last 72 hours of PLDC, your E5 should be null and void.
Yeah,
I'll pull that from your 201
you
file.
can have
it. So then we went to our second deployment to Afghanistan in it was January 2003.
Yeah.
And this time we were living out of Bagram Airfield. And the same thing, we did a stint as QRF, but I think that was only maybe a month or something.
A month or 6 weeks or something like that.
And we ended up responding to another downed aircraft. This time it was a Black Hawk. And that's the one I've written a pretty in-depth story about. And I ended up getting in contact with the family years later. And it's a pretty powerful story. And I think that'll be a podcast in itself. But we ended up doing that mission. And then the rest of that deployment was safe house operations out of a little village called BariKowt, way up in northeastern Afghanistan. Way up, it was literally on the Pakistani border. I think the Pakistani border is what?
It was the top of that ridge.
Yeah, a click away.
Yeah. 5,000 vertical feet and one click on the map.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to take you all day to get there.
Yeah.
But, and that deployment to this day is one of my favorite deployments because we did, and again, I didn't fire my rifle on that deployment in combat. You know, we ended up doing some training and whatnot, but we had an IED take out a vehicle. We had a couple rockets shot at us. And at the time, we felt like seasoned combat veterans.
Yeah,
we had a rocket shot at me. You
after the IED, we rolled up that village. We actually did a pretty good job of clearing the village. Like, it went really smoothly, and then we wrapped up the one guy with a cell phone. Like, at this time, IEDs were not a big thing. And, you know, fast forward to Iraq 2006, a guy with a cell phone is enemy number one, shot on sight. And it just sort of stuck out to a couple of guys that we're out in the middle of nowhere, and this guy has a Nokia in his pocket. And so we flex tied him and took him back to the safe house. Turned out he was our guy.
I was actually up on an OP when that happened. So
okay.
We were up on the OP to the behind the safe house with my team.
Okay. Yeah, and that, to back up a little bit, we chose as a platoon to go on that deployment. That deployment was originally a one company deployment that was going to go to Charlie Company 275. And, you know, about a week out, they decided they needed a fourth platoon. So at the time, we were the senior most platoon in the battalion. Remember, that was when I don't think we had any privates, and the only privates in the whole platoon were in the weapons squad, and they were ABs and AGs, and all our like assaulter line squads.
Most of the guys were tabbed.
Everybody was tabbed, and so I can remember Lieutenant Satterland got all the team leaders and above around. He said, "Okay, here's the deal." The Bush administration at the time was kind of starting to beat the war drum and talk about Iraq, but it wasn't a sure thing. There was a lot of rhetoric and who knows how this is all going to play out. And so we said, you know, we know we can deploy to Afghanistan right now if we want. However, we may miss out on an invasion of Iraq the way talk is going. And sure enough, we missed out on our second invasion, sitting up there in BariKowt.
So I remember it was a unanimous decision. Let's go to Afghanistan because that's a sure thing.
Yes.
And everybody's like, if we miss this opportunity and Iraq doesn't kick off, we're going to be kicking ourselves in the ass.
Yeah. And Afghanistan had been slow. So if you think like through our childhood, the wars had been Urgent Fury in Grenada, 72 hours. Just Cause in Panama, 72 hours. The Battle of Mogadishu, it was a longer operation, but the battle was 24 hours.
Yep.
So we were all kind of like, this could be it. This could be our generation's war, over and done.
Yep.
So we might as well take this second deployment.
No idea that we'd still be there in year 2020.
No clue.
But so while we were in our safe house out in the middle of nowhere, we again listened to the rest of the regiment invade Iraq.
Yeah.
And man, I remember thinking like, here we go again. Yep. And everybody got to get it on, and they had
they were actually, it wasn't a airborne drop. They air assaulted across and were hitting targets with CAG and
the Haditha Dam and a lot of good missions.
Yeah.
But even though we didn't get to partake in the invasion again, I still look back on that deployment very fondly because
that was a good deployment.
That deployment for me, it wasn't about combat. It was about culture. And the biggest takeaway from that deployment is as a young 21 or 22-year-old Ranger, or whatever I was, it's easy to be like, fuck everybody, kill them all, let God sort them out. All of that kind of macho mentality to cultures on the other side of the world is very prevalent.
Yeah.
And then you realize like, oh, a lot of these people are cool.
Yeah.
Like these people looked out for us. They were appreciative that we were there.
Yes.
And, you know, that guy we talked about last time, Dean,
Yep.
like helped my squad get out of a minefield.
Yeah.
He came running out and he was screaming. And again, I forgot, was it Farsi or
Pashtun?
Pashtun. That's right. And it was very apparent something was wrong, but I didn't know what.
Right.
It was like playing charades, and he's using his hands to make like an explosion. Yeah. Pointing at the ground and then an explosion with his hands.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting up on SATCOM and called back to base and said, hey, get the interpreter on the imbiter. I want to try and figure out what's going on. And again, like trying to have two Afghanis communicate with push to talk.
Oh God.
Was just painful.
Yeah.
But we ended up figuring out that I had led our team into a middle of a minefield.
Right.
Which that's not my bad, because I think 90% of Afghanistan's mined, right? Yeah. But I mean, it is what it is, right? But the locals that have been tending goats and have like farms and whatnot, it was mined by the Russians in the 70s.
Yeah.
But just because those mines are 30 years old,
80s
or 80s, yeah. Just because those mines are that old, like we still had locals that would come to the base that were getting blown up, like
come in because their kid get their foot blown off. So they knew that we were giving. One of the things we did when we set up that safe house was started, you know, like free clinics for the locals. Yeah, we called them MedCaps, medical capabilities, and we would do like, I mean, we were vaccinating animals, humans, passing out aspirin, anything you can imagine. And our medics got a lot of experience just being able to like. Yeah. And I grew up with horses, and I'd vaccinated animals before. So I was giving goats, you know, I was like, oh, here, I can help you give the goats shots. But yeah, again, it was a lot of that kind of stuff. It was like community building, and it was just interesting to see kind of how, like, looking back on it, that was more of a hearts and minds operation. And I know that term rubs a lot of guys the wrong way. It was a show of presence, because we were there to intercept Al-Qaeda coming over from Pakistan. Mm-hmm. We were just there at the wrong time of year. So the mountains were snowed in, and you know, it's also telling, we were learning how to fight the war in 2003. And so in the American mindset, we're at war, let's go. But if you live there, take the winter off. Yeah. Why are you in a hurry? You don't have a budget. Uh-huh. So yeah, and I'm not going anywhere. So cross the mountains to Pakistan, stay the winter there, and we can come back in the spring and do a little fighting. Yeah, and we didn't know how good we had it at the time either, because, I mean, we were given free reign to do whatever we wanted. And I remember as an E5 team leader, you could tell the PL and the platoon sergeant, like, hey, I want to go outside of the wire. You see that ridge line up there? I'm going to set a patrol base in there with my team, and I'll take a gun team with me, and we'll be up there for 4 days. And every time, Lieutenant Satterland wanted us working. Yeah. He pushed us. He pushed us hard there. And hindsight being 2020, I think the op tempo, the culture that he created, is probably why we didn't get much resistance. I think so. Because we were out, we were active. We were making a presence. We were learning the terrain. We were learning the cities. Yep. Again, all the little tiny cities, like I said, Doklam and Nare. I can't believe you remember those names. And I have pictures. It's funny, now that you say the name, I was looking through old pictures, and I have pictures of Doklam. But I would never have remembered that name. And we could just take our teams out and kind of do our own thing. And we could go fishing with grenades in the Kunar River. Some guys would get horses and go on horseback patrol. Remember, we went up to that village and watched that, I'm going to butcher this. What's it called? Bushkashki? I don't think I was there with you. No, that's a totally different activity. No, it's close to that. Is this the goat head game? No, it's a full goat. They're playing. I didn't see that. So, okay, yeah, they're on horseback, and it's like, I mean, I'll butcher it trying to explain the rules, but it's basically just go watch Rambo 5 or whatever. It's basically like soccer on horseback, and it's polo. But with like a dead goat. You're using a dead goat instead of a ball. And just all of that stuff, you know, is just a cool experience. And living out amongst the population, I mean, we ate Afghan food quite a bit.
all the time because it was either that or mermites.
Those what do they call those things? Not sea rations. What were those? It was a giant package of Chilean rice that they'd throw in a kettle of boiling.
I thought it was mermites.
Tea rations.
Tea ration. That's right.
Tea rations. That's what those were.
Or it was dehydrated food, like astronaut shit.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we lived amongst the locals. We ate their food. And I don't know. That's something I always tell people, like, if the war ever ends in Afghanistan, I want to go back there.
It would be cool.
You know, the terrain, the mountains. Afghanistan is not what most people have in mind.
No. And if you get out, I guess we didn't really spend much time in the big cities, but when you get out in those mountains, the people are pretty like honorable. They have a code that they live by, and they honor that code. And it's, I mean, I found Iraq to be almost 1/8. I mean, it could not be more polar opposite.
No, but Iraq was
I have
180 degrees
I have
opposite.
a lot of respect for those mountain people out there in the Konar Valley.
And I mean, when they lived under the Taliban reign, it was terrible.
Yeah.
And you know, like killing their kids and just creating a constant state of fear, because when someone's living under fear, you can control that person. Yeah. And that's what the Taliban did there. So when we ousted the Taliban, it was like, to those people, we were their saviors, and they showed that appreciation to us.
Yeah.
You know, like every single village we went into, like, hey, you can eat with us if you need a place to sleep.
That's
like,
right. Yeah, we stayed a few nights in people's houses out on patrol.
That's right.
Yeah.
You could probably never do that shit anymore.
No, I'm sure that would be next.
Because I've been, I mean, one of our buddies who's with the unit now, he told me years later, after he was with the unit for a long time, he goes, I've never had that kind of freedom ever since that deployment.
Wow.
Like that was the one where we could literally do whatever we wanted.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, pretty cool to be able to, we may not have been on either of the invasions, but still just being part of the wars early on is an experience that, you know, most people never will get to have. And so when we got done that deployment, because the rest of the regiment invaded Iraq, it ended, we had no relief to come and replace us.
Yeah, we were there 7 months.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a 90-day rotation, and it was over double that. But once we got done with that deployment, I think that was it for both of us, right? I ETS.
A bunch of you guys were ETSing fast, and Castro and I still had like 6 months to go. And so I was kind of on the fence, but as each one of my friends ETS'd, and also at that time, so we're talking like late 2003, we'd had 2 slow deployments in Afghanistan. The invasion of Iraq had gone down, and things were slow in Iraq. So there was a company in Afghanistan, and there was a company in Iraq. And I think the company in Iraq was doing convoy, like escort from Kuwait to Baghdad. And it was like, well,
not what you want to be doing.
Just like I mentioned, you know, a few minutes back, I thought, well, this was my generation's flash in the pan. You know, that was it. So moving on. And holy shit, was I wrong. I can remember, so I got out and went to Oregon State University for about 5 minutes. And it was while I was there that I remember seeing a headline like suicide or roadside bomb kills troops, and thinking, ooh, that's ugly. And that was kind of the beginning. You know, it was early 2004 is when the insurgency really took off.
Yeah. And so Foulke and I both, after we got out of the Ranger Regiment, went into military contracting with different organizations, with the OGA, with State Department. But I think we should save that for a whole other podcast in itself, because the contract world was wild. Yeah. And it was a lot of similarities to the military, but a lot of like stark contrasts to the military as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really was the Wild West in Iraq in like 04, 05, 06.
Yeah.
That was, again, you know, talking about the early days of the war when there weren't a lot of rules and you could kind of do whatever you wanted. And part of the reason I left contracting, I mean, aside, I kind of grew out of it and matured out of it. But, you know, by 08, 09, it was like, man, you can't do anything.
Yeah, I know.
All the fun's gone.
Yeah.
No more covert runs to the liquor store downtown, in and out in 2 minutes like bank robbers.
Yeah. So, yeah, we ended up leaving the Ranger Regiment. We both left in 03, right? Or were you early 04?
Christmas of 03.
Christmas of 03. And, yeah, you know, like I tell everybody, I think I think spending those 4 years with the Ranger Regiment was probably the most formative years of my life.
Absolutely.
You learn more in those 4 years about team dynamics, camaraderie, what you're made of, like
how to conduct yourself, how to be part of a team, and how to lead a team.
Yep.
You can sort of fall back and forth. Either I can be on the crew or I can lead the crew, and I can do a really good job of either one.
And that's something that stuck with me to this day. I always preach, because in our society, leadership is always like put on a pedestal. If you're a leader, you're like, that's a almost a compliment, right? But if you're a follower, that's actually almost derogatory. And I've always told people, like, I think that's a misconception, because
good teammates are.
A good teammate is what you want to be.
Yeah.
You want to be able to fall into place and, hey, if I'm suited to lead this patrol and I have experience here, or I've patrolled this area before, hey, let me come up with the route. Let me take lead on it. And, or if someone else is more suited than you, then allow them to take the lead. And there's no shame in that.
Yeah,
that's
it's
actually
important when you're just on the team and your team member to know your strengths and play to them. Like, this is what I'm good at. Let me take this part for you. You're the leader. You've got your hands full. You've got a million things on your mind. I'm good at this.
Yep.
Let me take this for you. Let me run with it.
And I saw that with the CAG guys a lot too, like at a way higher level than we saw in Ranger Regiment.
Yeah.
But still, just being exposed to that stuff as a young man, you start to learn what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and where you fit in the best. And once you understand a team dynamic at the highest level, meaning like when you're on patrol, it could be life or death consequences, right? That's something that's understood when you're at that level of military operations. But it's no different to apply that same type of work ethic and importance on camaraderie and looking out for each other and taking care of the people you work with. I've applied that to every job I've ever had since then.
Yeah, and you see it in the in the private world, the civilian world. You see a lot of backstabbing. Like, I'm going to try to work my way up by making everybody else around me, like, highlighting their failures. It's so fucking wrong.
And nothing. The worst part about that is, not only is that just an unethical way.
But by the time, if you do get to the top, everybody's going to hate you.
Yes, exactly. Like I said, not only is it an unethical way to try and progress and make advancements in your career field, but you're only fucking yourself long term. Because, I mean, the world's big, but it's also small, and you're going to come in if that person is someone that you're in competition with now, there's a good chance that you may have to work with that person in the future. Yeah. Your paths are going to cross again. Except now you've tarnished your name, whereas if you just treat people well and be willing to grind and do the right thing, like, that starts to speak for itself. And you're never going to find yourself in a situation where just because you hoped for a promotion or you hoped for a certain position that it's going to end up and it's actually going to tarnish your reputation long term. Yeah. I saw that in the federal government a lot.
Yeah,
again,
I see
we'll do a whole nother podcast when I worked with the feds. But going from an operational unit where there's a lot of camaraderie to going to units where it's cutthroat, I don't understand how they get anything done.
No, it's got to be really hard. And, like, even now at work, like, I've been a commercial electrician for 10 years. There are guys we pay above their position because they're just great guys to have on the team. Just a way of saying, you know what, thanks for doing, so it's not the only way. You don't have to stab someone in the back and sort of be this evil piece of shit to get ahead. You just go out there and do your best for the team you're on, and it gets recognized. I would hope it gets recognized. Yeah.
So, I mean, we're coming up on 2 hours. I think it's a good spot to call it. We have a million more conversations to have.
Oh, yes.
We both spent an additional 5 or 6 years in the Middle East doing different contracts. And then we both got married and have kids now and are raising families, and just a lot of different things that I think I want to encompass on this podcast. And it's not going to be all war fighting and military stuff, but, for this episode, I thought it was good to really hone in on the Ranger Regiment and kind of give everybody that's listening an overview of what that phase of our life was like. So Thanks for listening. Foulke, you got anything else?
I'm good.
You're good. All right, guys. Until next time, have a good one.